In 2077, they voted my city the worst place to live in America. Main issues, sky-high rate of violence, and more people living below the poverty line than anywhere else.
Feel the rhythm of the streets, neon lights and neon dreams, bloody face, they feel no pain when there's so much more to gain. Hunting season, if you will, tell me where'd you rather be? I can hardly see the moon, hope we'll get there pretty soon.
Hi, how are you doing today? Night? Whenever I decide to upload this, or better, whenever you find this video. I'm starting a new series on the channel called Why You Should. This is a series where I'll be breaking down the game and telling you why you should play it. In this case, we're talking about one of my favorite games in recent years, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, if you ask anyone who's ever heard of Cyberpunk, they're likely going to tell you to steer clear of the game. And as that statement may be justified to an extent, it's definitely a thing of the past. Cyberpunk 2077 first released on December 10th of 2020. The reason the game has such a bad rep is simply because of the state of the game upon release. When the game first released, it was an utter mess, I must admit, but we're not here to talk about that. There's a million other channels that will give you the specifics on what this game used to be. I'm here to tell you, well, why you should pick this title up today and at least give it a try. From the very beginning of the game, you are thrown into an incredibly designed and immersive world. This should come as no surprise as the game is developed by the Witcher creators, CD Projekt Red. You play as a highly customizable character named V, whose gender depends on your personal preference. Cyberpunk allows you to choose how you would like to start your story with a system called the Life Path system. The system allows you to choose if you'd like to start the game as a corpo, which is a highly prestigious position to hold in Night City, working for a big corporation, much like the real world. In fact, you start working for the biggest corp in the city, which is Arasaka. Corpo V is uniquely clued up on everything corporate. You can use this to your advantage to trip others up and even persuade them to do things for you, as you are given unique dialogue options only available to you by choosing this life path as your intro into the game. The second choice is a street kid. This is meant to throw you into the game as a reckless resident of Night City, just barely getting by. The street kid knows the city well, and it's fair to say you're used to getting into many brawls and fights. This intro gives you a small and quick glimpse at the friction between rival gangs in the area. Street Kid V knows the names of all the gang leaders throughout Night City and knows much about the history of areas in the city. The unique dialogue options are spread all over the city when playing as the Street Kid V. And the last path you can choose is a nomad. This path allows you to start outside of the famous Night City and inside of the Badlands. You make your way into the city to begin your journey throughout the story. You've recently broken away from your clan in the Badlands, so you're currently traveling solo. Nomads are known to typically travel in groups, also called clans. The game story can be highly impacted depending on the choices you choose as either male or female V. There are certain endings that are just not playable as female V over male V, and vice versa. This is because of the romance options in the game. The ending of the game is highly dependent on the relationships you build as you play throughout the entire game, making friends, lovers, or just push everyone away and stay completely alone. The game doesn't hold back any punches in showing you how ruthless life is in this universe. You are backstabbed, betrayed, struggling to find your way to the top and taking on risky jobs constantly and making connections to get closer to the answers you're seeking as the story develops. I don't want to hands down ever just spoil anything substantial in any games I'll be talking about in doing this series, so I'll just say this. Night City has many mysteries for you to discover and unveil the truth as you wander around. The main plot of the game is jam-packed with amazing story beats to keep the momentum going. As V, you're growing into just as much of a ruthless mercenary as the very people you're trying to take down. Now, for the sake of the video, I'm going to get into some spoiler-heavy details for the beginning of the story, because I feel like you should know what your real motivation is in the main plot of the game. Through some unfortunate circumstances, as you're on a gig, you deal with a mysterious cybernetic implant that threatens to overwrite and take over your entire body. The personality and memories of the famous Johnny Silverhand, who's played by Keanu Reeves, who has been dead for decades, is something only V can see and hear. Figuring out how to separate yourself before you're completely overwritten is the main driving motivator for your actions throughout the game. Johnny will constantly glitch up during side missions and of course the main story missions that are driving the plot forward. Choosing to side with him can have its own benefits, but again, I don't want to get too much into that as much as simply explaining your main drive for doing anything story-wise in the game. As you travel across Night City, possibly sightseeing and neglecting the main story, you will have moments of utter pause. Your screen will begin to shift and phase in and out and become more digitally corrupted as the cybernetic implant I've recently mentioned continues to process to take over and rewrite your entire body into Johnny Silverhand. This process is not subtle at all either. In most instances, V will even comment about how much pain they're in as these glitches are happening. Speaking of traveling across Night City, CD Projekt Red has done an absolute astonishing job at creating a buzzing cyber city world that feels alive. Over the course of many updates and many more to come, the city has become visually more and more stunning. This is especially true if you're not playing on performance mode, which is meant to optimize frame rates at 60 FPS and overall smoothness of gameplay versus playing with a more visually stunning mode running in native 4K with ray tracing, making the city look absolutely incredible. That's not to say playing in performance mode isn't going to leave you in awe, it just lacks a certain level of depth given to the more visual resolution mode you can run this game at. The downside to having the game look much better is the fact that the game will be running at a steady 30 FPS. These modes are only here in the console versions, of course, as on PC, everything is customizable to your liking for how beefed up a machine you have or how little your PC can run. So again, this isn't for the PC versions, as you can make it look as stunning and want to have the game running at a great frame rate depending on your personal system. My favorite look to Night City is definitely when it's raining. For me, the entire vibe of the city changes and feels a bit more immersive in a weird way. The way the lights reflect off of wet roads and buildings just scratch a deep itch for my love of futuristic, sci-fi, cybernetic, dystopian settings. This game has a pretty in-depth photo mode, which allows you to capture your favorite parts of the game in style, save beautiful cityscape locations, and just view the game in a different light in general. What a beautiful game this is. To me, Cyberpunk 2077 has always been an incredible game, visually without a doubt. CD Projekt Red has truly put their time into developing the lore and crafting an insane amount of world-building quests and placing items in specific locations to give you an even more in-depth look at the world all around you. Just like in Bethesda's Fallout, Cyberpunk 2077 has much of the lore behind computer files you can discover in-game and on recordings found throughout the city and in certain buildings with a ton of lore. Heck, just the NPCs alone all around this world has so much to offer for the lore of this universe. As you travel across the city from place to place, it really makes you think, how did things get so bad? What made this corporation need such military backing? What made everyone so fearful? Why is it so overrun with drugs and gang violence? Hell, I grew up in New York City and it's barely a fraction of how bad it's gotten in Night City. What happened to the rest of the world that made the Badlands what it is today? A barren wasteland with very little to offer. Whose idea was it to even create Night City? You can find many of these answers in-game, but to even further convince you of the amount of effort that has always been put into the world of Cyberpunk 2077, you have to know, Cyberpunk did start as a tabletop game back in the late 1900s. In 1988, we had our first glimpse of this dark future with Cyberpunk 2013. Afterwards, 3 supplementary books were released to flesh out the world and character roles even more. By 1990, we were given Cyberpunk 2020, which expanded the information given to us about the world from Cyberpunk 2013. Cyberpunk 2020 gave us much more detailed backstories for the corporations. In 1997, the Firestorm books were published. These two, originally 3 adventure books, were meant to introduce the concept of the Fourth Corporate War to the player and move the story forward into the late 2020s through the 2030s. The campaign pitched the player up against Arasaka, but with the help of many of the named characters throughout the series, such as Morgan Blackhand and Johnny Silverhand. A third Firestorm book was planned, but eventually became part of the Cyberpunk version 3.0 rulebook. Arasaka, alongside the impact of the Fourth Corporate War, is a topic constantly being revisited as you explore Night City in Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red has always cared about this title. If they didn't, they wouldn't have put so much into weaving in and out of the original lore and adding much more upon exploring the current state of Night City as you see it through V's eyes. There's so much more they reference and directly say by name, events the game is expecting you to have some prior knowledge of when talking about, such as the crash of the net and the corporate wars. If you'd like to learn even more, I'm going to be leaving a direct link to the Cyberpunk wiki in the description. You can thank me later. The way the world is fleshed out is one of the biggest highlights of the game. I believe to fully appreciate this game, you have to develop a genuine appreciation and love for the setting this is going for and how much they're putting into developing the overall lore and story of Cyberpunk. Up till this point, I've only barely mentioned another key highlight to this game in all its glory. The supporting cast of characters in this game is probably the key factor that would literally make or break this game. You meet the supporting cast of characters mainly through exploring the city and going on tons of side missions. The side mission significance in the game is massive. Literally, your connections with certain people will determine the ending you have, as there are multiple endings in Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red does a great job at fleshing out your interactions between each important side character you meet, and in most cases, I found it easy to forget the main plot you're supposed to be focused on and getting more and more distracted by learning more and more about the side characters through many different quests. These quests actually tend to shake up the core gameplay loop as well. The missions range from stealth quests to all-out shootouts to information gathering to rescue missions to just going from one place to the next. This mixed in with the creativity you have when leveling up to pour your skill points into different skills definitely makes this game even more engaging. In many cases, you will get massive rewards from these side missions, more so than the main plot, so it's highly incentivized to explore and immerse yourself in the world you're placed in. These rewards can be as small as little gear upgrades to whole vehicles you obtain through races or just getting street cred. Street cred is a unique ranking system in this game that levels up the more you make a name for yourself throughout Night City doing different gigs and side missions. Street cred gives you access to higher forms of cybernetic upgrades from various Ripper docks located all throughout the city and massive upgrades for armors and weapons. Through various build guide videos, I'm sure you'll find the right upgrades that fit your playstyle perfectly. There's more than enough ways to play Cyberpunk 2077, which even further adds to the replayability of the game. All in all, I'm not here to break down a ton of systems in the game or give you too much about the game. I'm just here telling you why you should play it. The simple answer is, you should play Cyberpunk 2077 if you enjoy futuristic, action, sci-fi, dystopian, cyberpunk worlds and RPGs. You will most certainly enjoy what Cyberpunk 2077 has to offer. The long answer is, you should play Cyberpunk 2077 for the rich, immersive world and city that is Night City, and exploring the many mysteries that linger through every dark alley. The mysteries that linger in the wastelands that are the Badlands. The questions that you will be itching to have answered as you are swallowed by the hard, almost suffocating lifestyle of many residents in Night City. Cyberpunk 2077 offers many different playstyles, skills, and abilities to cater to your specific liking. The story is rich, the lore is massive and rapidly growing, and all in all, Cyberpunk 2077 is a beautiful experience I feel every serious single-player gamer should at least experience once. A side note I want to point out is how incredible the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime on Netflix is. CD Projekt Red has recently expanded the lore for Cyberpunk 2077 with the anime, as it takes place over the course of the most recent years, up to 1 year before V is introduced to us in Cyberpunk 2077. The anime has been a massive success, adding even more players to Cyberpunk 2077, and now people are finally starting to realize the brilliance that is Cyberpunk by CD Projekt Red. If you enjoyed this, please like the video, as this took a lot of time and effort. I'm looking forward to bringing more of this series to you all. I love so many video games and want to keep spreading good vibes. So from now on, if you'd like to see me play a game live, I'll be streaming games I'll end up making a Why You Should Play video on. Subscribe to catch me live and join my memberships, as my streams will be available post-stream only to my members. Once we get even bigger, my streams in general will only be available to members. It doesn't matter what tier you are, you'll be able to see and interact greatly with me and the content on the channel as a channel member. Help make this a full-time thing for me so I can continue bringing you amazing content in the near future. And of course, let me know what game you'd like me to go over next. And for anyone new, welcome to the chillest place on the internet.